I want to go ahead and take a look at all of the different configurable options that would be available when making an AJAX request. So the idea here is that I want to start out with an HTML page, and the HTML page is going to load a collection of users from a server-side component. So I'm just going to title this ajaxOptions, and then I'll have a script source equal to ajax.js. And in the body, I want to load a list of all users that come from some server-side script. So I'm going to go ahead and save this into a web server directory. So I'm going to save it into this documents directory. I'm going to create a new folder called ajaxOptions. And then this file I'll save as index.html. And I'll give myself a little more screen real estate. In this ajax.js folder, I want to, or in that file, I want to have an initialize method, or an init method. So here's my function definition. And I want that to be triggered in the window.onload event. Okay, so that's the setup there. And then this method's going to get triggered automatically, and that's where I want to populate this body with some dynamic HTML. So I want to load my user accounts. Okay. However, before I start working on the server-side code, I want to think about an AJAX request. So a basic AJAX request, let's go ahead and code that up. So I'm going to make an AJAX request. A basic AJAX request is going to take a URL, and then possibly an HTTP method, and let's go from there. Okay, so we have our AJAX request. It's fairly straightforward, so we're going to go ahead and have an XML HTTP request object. So we have our XML HTTP request object. We're going to open it. So we're going to open it via a certain HTTP method, and we're going to go to a specific URL. We're going to send the request, and right now we're going to send it with no parameters. And then in between here, we're going to set up our callback. So our callback is going to be onReadyStateChange. So xhr.onReadyStateChange. Let's go ahead and run this function definition. And then we're going to check if the xhr ready state is equal to 4, meaning our response is ready and available. Then we'd execute our callback code. This is really our callback code, and what I'm talking about here in this case is I'd like to load my user objects from server-side code. Okay, so let's go ahead and code that up. Before we code this up to load our user objects from our server-side code, we obviously need some user objects. So I'm going to go ahead and create some user objects in server-side code. So I'm going to have a script to do that. So users.php. So I have a simple PHP script. And I want to create some user objects. So I'll have a variable called users. It's going to be equal to an empty array. And then I want to populate that empty array. So users at my first available index will be another array. And then this array is going to be an associative array, so we might have an ID equal to 1, a name equal to Bill Gates, and an email equal to bgates@msn.com. And then we can just kind of copy and paste this to create a couple of user accounts. So let's go with 4. So ID2, ID3, ID4. So let's pick some other users. Jeff Bezos, Jeff at Amazon, Elon Musk, Elon at Tesla, and then let's use Steve Jobs. Okay, these are my 4 user accounts. And then I should be able to echo out the JSON encoded version of these users. And the idea here is that if I actually go look at this, and I always tell people, before I try to integrate this with my JavaScript code, I want to make sure that it's working the way I expect it to be working. And by that I mean, I expect to get some JSON data. I expect to get a collection of user objects, and each user object should have an ID, a name, and an email, and I expect to see 4 of them. And I want to verify that that is the case. So I'm going to go out to my browser and take a look at this. So I'm going to localhost ajaxOptions, and then we called this users.php. And I can see that I'm getting this JSON data that I expected. I know that my server-side code is working because I just tested it. Okay, so I've verified that it's working, and now I want to take that over to my JavaScript code. Okay, so I know that when the ready state's equal to 4, I'm going to have some response text where I can load some user objects, and life's going to be good. So let's go ahead and parse that JSON. So I'm going to have a variable called users. It's going to be equal to json.parse, and I'm taking the xhr.response text. That'll give me my collection of users, and then I should be able to go through each of them and output them. So I want to create an unordered list. So here's my list. So just doing a little dynamic HTML. And then I'm going to have a for loop, I equal to 0, I less than users.length, I plus plus. And then we're going to create a list item. So I'm going to have a variable item equal to document.createElement. It's a list item. Our items inner HTML. We're going to just use the name of the user, so users at i.name. And then we're going to append that to our list. And then eventually, when we're done with our for loop, we want to take our list and append it to the body. Okay, and ideally, if I go look at my HTML now, what we'll see is that we should have a list. You'll notice that I don't have any errors. I go look at my network traffic, nothing there. And the reason why is because I wrote this method, but I never actually triggered it. So in the onload, I trigger the init, which is empty, but I never make this AJAX request. So I never actually invoke that method. Okay, and when I do invoke that method, I have to supply the URL that I want to go to. So that was the incoming parameter that we're going to use, and then the HTTP method that we want to use. So our URL is going to be users.php, and our method is going to be an HTTP GET. Okay, so now if we do this, now you'll see that we do make our request out to users.php. We get our list of users. If I go inspect those elements, so I actually want to take a look at the elements, and I'm looking at the styles right now. I don't want to be looking at the styles. I'm going to expand this, and we should see our unordered list with our list items. Okay. Okay, so now I want to soup this up a little bit, and I want to just point out the fact that we could make this method a little bit more reusable. And when I initially say that, it's a little bit confusing because we have this custom code to load all of our users. But what if we have our URL, our method type, and then a third parameter, which is our callback? Okay, so we're going to have a method called load users. It's going to be a function definition. And this is where we want to do all of this stuff. So I'm just cutting it out and moving it into my load users method. Okay, so our callback code, we're going to have a callback parameter. So right now we're going to supply a URL, a method, a callback. Load users is our callback. And then here's where things get a little bit interesting. When we're ready for our callback code, that's when we're going to invoke our callback. Okay, I think most of you are okay with that. The problem is my callback, in order for it to work, needs this response text. So it needs that XML or XHR response text that we had before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pass that along. And then just to simplify things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it along, but I'm going to pass it along assuming that it is JSON. Okay, so I'm going to assume that this response text is JSON. So I'm going to go ahead and parse it right here. And we'll take care of that in a second. But my load users now is going to take a parameter called users. Okay, so I'm getting an incoming parameter called users that's coming from the response text that I've parsed as JSON. So now I know I can skip this step here where I was parsing my users. Okay, so I got rid of it. And now let's take a look and make sure that things are working the exact same way. Okay, so you'll notice that they're still working exactly the same way. I still have my users coming from the server. I'm still building my list. Life's good. Okay. So now here's where things get a little tricky. I want to use my application the way I am, but then I also want to have a heading, so an h1 tag, with an ID equal to message of the day, and I want to populate that message of the day with some message from my server. Okay, so over here I'm going to create some new server-side code, message of the day.php. And all we're going to do is we're going to echo out some message. Okay, so we're just echoing out plain text. So in our case, we're going to say, hello world. That's our message of the day. Okay, so pretty straightforward. And what I want to do is I want to take that response and I want to load that into that h1 tag that we just created, this message of the day. I want to get that from the server, whatever that message is. In our case, it's hello world. And I want to load it into this h1 tag. And again, I always tell people, let's test this out first to make sure that our server-side code works the way we expect it to. Okay, so that looks okay to me. So if we go to our network traffic, here's our message of the day. All we're doing is outputting hello world, and that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so I want to load this h1 tag with the message of the day from the server. That's great, but I've written this AJAX request, and I want to make it work for loading my users and for loading the message of the day. So I'm going to have another callback called load message. It's going to take one incoming parameter, which is the message, and then I want to load it into that h1 tag. So I'm going to use document.querySelector to go get the message of the day field, that h1 tag, and I'm going to set the inner HTML to the message. Okay, so that callback is going to be fairly straightforward. Okay, so now I want to use this AJAX request. So we're going to go to messageoftheday.php. We're going to be doing an HTTP GET, and our callback is load message. Okay, so we're creating this reusable method. When we make an AJAX request, we need to know what the URL is, what the HTTP request method type is, and then our callback. So now when I refresh this, you're going to see it fails. And if I look at my console, I get an error saying, hey, there's an unexpected token H in JSON at position 0. And the reason I'm getting that error is because if I go back to my AJAX request method, in the callback, I took the response text and I tried to parse JSON out of it. I tried to take that plain text response and I tried to parse JSON out of it. Well, here's the issue, is in one request, I did have JSON and it worked fine. That's why I have my list of users. In the second request, I didn't have JSON, I just had plain text, and I can't parse JSON out of just plain text. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and have another parameter in this AJAX request, which is my request type. Okay, so I have the request type there, and then I'm going to say if the request type is equal to JSON, then do this. Then go ahead and parse the JSON. Otherwise, let's just execute our callback with the response text. Okay, so now if I go back up to my calls, the users.php is going to return JSON. So I'm going to say that I expect a JSON response. Okay, so I'm passing in a fourth parameter. Here I'm expecting a plain text response, so I could do something like this. But the reality is I don't need it, and I'll explain why here in a second. But you can see that it's working now. If I just change it so that I have this request type, and then I supply JSON when I expect JSON. I don't supply anything when I don't expect JSON. And the reason this works is because in JavaScript, all of my incoming parameters that I would pass to a method are optional. Okay, in this case, I didn't supply the request type. It's an optional parameter, and since I didn't supply it, that request type becomes undefined. And what I'm checking is if it's JSON, well, undefined is not JSON. So if it's JSON, go ahead and parse it as JSON. But if it's anything else, treat it as plain text. Okay, and then just to be safe with things, I'm going to go ahead and have an else if request type is equal to XML. So if it's XML, do it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and execute my callback with the xhr.response XML. Otherwise, then we use the default, which is plain text. So now our request type is handling JSON, it's handling XML, and then it's handling anything else, and it's treating anything else other than JSON and XML as just plain text. Okay, so our method can now handle the different response types, and that's why you see over here that we're able to get our message of the day, we're able to get our JSON list of user accounts. Okay, let's take this a step further, and let's assume that we want to be able to delete these user accounts. And in order to delete the user accounts, I need to be able to say, okay, this user is associated with this user ID. And if you remember back to our users.php, each of those users had an ID. So what I want to do is when I output those user accounts over in my JavaScript, so when I was outputting those user accounts, right here I'm creating this list, I want to associate the ID of the user with the corresponding list item that contains that user. Okay, so I'm going to take this item and I'm going to set an attribute. And the attribute is going to be data-user ID. And the value that I'm going to use is users@i.id. Okay, and now we can come back through and check. And it looks like I have a syntax error. Item.setAttribute. That looks okay. It's telling me on line 42. Line 42, I have an issue because I'm missing a curly brace here in this else. Okay, if I inspect those elements, you can see that I have the corresponding data user IDs for the various list items that I've created. And now what I should be able to do is I should be able to create a button next to each of those elements. So let me go ahead and create an element when I load my users. I want to create a button element. So my list item, I append, or I set the name, and then I want to create a new button. So document.createElement button. So I'm going to create a delete button. And I want the delete button to have some inner HTML, which will just be delete. I want the delete button's type to be a button. And then I want to set up an event listener. So delete button.add event listener. I'm listening for the click event. I want to be able to remove the user. Okay, so I'm going to have a function called remove user. It's going to be some function definition. And the idea with this remove user is I want to determine which user I should click, or which user was clicked, and then I want to send that corresponding ID back to the server so that I could then remove that user from my list of user accounts. Okay, that's the idea, is I want to treat this method as a method that's going to get triggered that's going to allow me to remove that user. Okay, so if I look at the user interface, I actually have to append the button. So item.append child delete button. So if I look at my user interface, there should be a button next to each of my users now. And then when I click on this, it's going to trigger my remove user, and that's where things get a little tricky, and that's where we got to get into my event handling. I have to figure out which delete button was clicked. So delete button for which user, and then based on that, I want to figure out the ID for that user, and I want to send that information over to the server. Okay, so the way I do that is in this add event listener, I know that the method that gets triggered automatically gets forwarded an event. We can use E for short. It's our event object. And the event will have a reference to the current target. So it'll give me a reference to whichever delete button was actually clicked. So I'm going to go ahead and get a reference to that button. Okay, and then the button's contained inside of a list item. So I can go to the parent node, which will be the list item, and then that list item is going to have an attribute called data-user-id. Okay, so that's going to give me the ID of the user. Okay, so I'm going to get a reference to the list item, so the button's parent node, and then that list item is going to have that data-user-id, which is going to be the user ID. So I'm going to have a variable ID to remove, and it's going to be equal to list item dot get attribute, and the attribute that I want is data-user-id. And for now, let's just log that ID to remove. Okay, so now if I refresh this and I look at my console, if I click on Bill Gates, you'll see it's 1. If I click on Steve Jobs, it's 4, or Jeff Bezos, or Elon Musk. So I can get any of the different users. I can click on it and I can determine the corresponding ID. And here's where things get a little tricky, is now I want to make an AJAX request to remove this. Okay, so I want to make an AJAX request to some URL that's going to allow me to remove that from my list of users. And I don't want to necessarily code up the server-side code to actually do a delete or anything like that. I just want to show you that now that I want to make this AJAX request and I want to send data to the server, now I need some additional information. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I like to leave the request type, and I called it the request type. It really should have been the response type. So sorry about that. This is my response type. And then that's what I'm actually looking for, whether I'm talking about JSON or XML, the response type, what's actually coming back from the server, not the request type. That'd be more the method. I like to leave that as an optional parameter, and my optional parameters, if they're truly optional, I like to leave as the last parameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a parameter called params so that I can send that to the server. And if I don't have parameters, so in this case, in both of these AJAX requests, I don't have parameters, then I do have to specify that there are no parameters. Okay, and I could leave it off the message of the day request, and you'll see that nothing is really affected here. It's still working exactly the same way. But now I have this fifth parameter, which is the parameters that I want to send to the server. Okay, with my AJAX request, I'm going to want to trigger some server-side code to delete a user. Okay, and then here's my PHP script. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume, since a delete user is going to change my server state, since my server state's changing, I should be using a post as opposed to a get. Okay, so then I'm going to have a variable called ID to remove, and the way I'm going to get that variable is from the post variable collection, and I'm going to pass it to the server as just an ID. So the parameter name that's coming to the server is just ID. I'm calling it ID to remove, and then I'm going to echo out some message. You are removing a user with an ID of, and then I can just embed ID to remove, and that'll show up. Okay, this is actually kind of hard to test. So since I'm doing an HTTP post, it's kind of hard to test. In order to test this, I could create a form and post that information, but more likely what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Postman. And I don't know that I actually have it installed on this machine, but I'm going to just do a search for Postman for Chrome. Here it is. Now, it looks like I've already installed it, so I'm going to launch the app. So here's Postman. I'm going to go right to the app. I'm just going to run it through Chrome. I'm going to make a request. And the request name, I can just call dummy request. It doesn't matter what the name is. Some description. That looks okay. Why am I'm not sure what it was asking me to do there. So I apologize for that. This is the user interface that I would use. I want to do an HTTP post, and the URL that I want to go to is localhost ajaxOptions, and then I want to go to the delete user.php. That's the page I want to go to. But then in the body, I want to encode a key value pair. So the ID is going to be 20. So key, corresponding value, and then I'm going to send that request. And you'll notice that you're getting a message saying you're removing a user with an ID of 20. That's the response that I'm looking for. If I change it to 200, then it'll tell me I'm trying to remove a user with an ID of 200. So I know that my server-side code is working at that point. Okay, this is how I would test it, is I'd include Postman and its extension in Chrome, and then I can launch it and then test it out. There's obviously other ways to do that, but it's easy and it's quick, so Postman is what I use to test that. Okay, so now that I've tested my server-side code, I should be able to integrate that over into my JavaScript code. I want to make an AJAX request. In the AJAX request, so the first parameter is going to be the URL, which will be delete user.php. My method to delete it, my HTTP method, is going to be a post, not a get. My callback, I might want to do something like I'm just going to have a confirmation. Remove user confirmation is equal to some function where I just log the response text. So I'm going to get the response, and I'm just going to log that. Okay, so my callback is going to be remove user confirmation. The parameters that I want to send, so I want to send the ID to remove. I want to send it as ID equal to some value. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable called params, and it's going to be equal to ID equal to, and then I'm going to concatenate the ID to remove, or better yet, I'll use a string template. With those backticks. So those are the parameters that I'm going to send. And then the response type, I'm not going to specify. Okay, the response type is going to be plain text, so I'm just getting the response and logging it. Okay, so here's where things get a little bit messy, is I am going to take that method, so it's going to be a post, I'm going to use that method, I'm going to open it, but then I never do anything with the parameters that were passed. Okay, and here's where it gets a little bit messy, is I have to include the parameters. If it's an HTTP GET, then I put the parameters in the URL. So if it's an HTTP GET, I'd have parameters $ID equal to. So if we just try to do something like this, plus params. Okay, we'll see some of the parameters. I'm going to close up Postman. So I go ahead and refresh the page and I look at my network traffic. You'll notice that users is coming back as null. So I'm passing a parameter null. And that's because there is no params. It's still working to get my users, but I really don't think that that looks right. But you'll notice if I go to delete Elon Musk, then I include the IDs equal to 3. And if I click on that, you're removing a user with an ID of, and then it doesn't show a value. And the reason it doesn't show a value is because I sent the ID via an HTTP GET, and that server-side code's expecting it as an HTTP POST. Okay, so I want to fix that. I don't want it as a GET. And then I also want to fix the fact that I might be sending null parameters or undefined parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if there's params, then my URL is going to be a certain URL. Okay, so my URL will plus equal question mark plus my params. Okay, so now I come back over and I'm still getting null and undefined. Why am I still getting null and undefined? So if params I don't think I should be in the params, and I think I might be sending null and I shouldn't be. I think I should be sending undefined because null still thinks there is something. Okay, so now it's saying it's undefined. We're getting closer. I'm including the concatenation, but I'm including the params. Oh, because I'm opening, I'm still concatenating it here. I'm just going to concatenate the URL. And now if we come back over, now you'll notice that it's working just fine. If I click on Steve Jobs, you can see that I embed the parameter the way I should if I was doing an HTTP GET. Okay, so if I try to delete, I'm passing it as an HTTP GET, but I'm not actually sending the data over to the server correctly. Okay, so the only time I'm going to do this is if it's an HTTP GET. Okay, and the reason I say that is if it's an HTTP GET, then I want to include the parameters this way. So I want to check if there's params and if the method is equal to GET. Okay, and I'm being pretty cavalier about the syntax because people could pass in uppercase GET, lowercase GET. I'm just not. I'm kind of ignoring it for now. I just want to show you all the different options that would be available in an AJAX request. So I'm being a little bit cavalier about the syntax, but I'm only going to concatenate the parameters to the URL if it's an HTTP GET. So now you'll notice we still have our users and message of the day, but when I try to delete this, you'll notice that I don't pass the parameters in the URL because they really shouldn't be there. I'm doing an HTTP post. Okay, so then I get down below, and again, I have to check the method. So I'm going to check the HTTP method. So if it's a post, then I want to send my request with the params. Otherwise, I want to send that with a null value. And then one last thing, since I'm doing a post, the way I actually include the parameters is I put the parameters in the request header. So if I'm going to do that, so I actually want to put the parameters in the request header, then I have to set one additional option. So I'm going to go to this XHR object and I'm going to set the request header. And then the content type is going to be application /x www form URL encoded. Okay, so now if I refresh the page, okay, so users message of the day is still fine, but now let's say I want to delete Elon Musk, we should see that network traffic. And now if I click on this, you'll see that you're removing a user ID with an ID of 3. And then I can also go to the headers and I can see that I passed that form data, the IDs equal to 3. Okay, so I'm sending that form data to the server via an HTTP post, and that's why I'm getting the response saying, hey, this is the user that you want to delete. If I try to delete Bill Gates, and I click on that, you'll see that I'm trying to remove a user with an ID of 1. Okay, so now I can distinguish between, am I doing a get or am I doing a post, and I can conditionally attach parameters the correct way. This method gets fairly complicated. And I'm not suggesting that you want to use this method. I'm using this method today because I wanted to kind of get into all the different options that you have in configuring an AJAX request. So we're going to want to know, what server-side code do we want to interact with? Are we interacting with it via a get or a post or a put or a delete? So right now we've only dealt with gets and posts, but theoretically I could have puts and deletes in there. What should happen when we get our response back from the server? What data do we want to send to the server? And then conditionally, how are we sending it? If it's a get, we send it one way versus a post, we send it another way. And then lastly, we figure out what's the response type. Because if it's JSON, we have to parse it. If it's XML, we want to get into the response XML. And if it's plain text, we can just deal with the response text. So this example is really just meant to show you all of the different configurable options when making an XML HTTP request back to the server, and then how do we handle those different options that we have, and just kind of exposing you to all of those different options.